This video is sponsored by World Anvil. Earlier this year, I made a video breaking down all of the world-building secrets I could find in the Shadowdark core rulebook. Through that process, we discovered that the publisher of the game, Kelsey Dion, aka the Arcane Library, had actually integrated an Arcane Library faction into the game, and it seems to have its roots in so many other aspects of the world of Shadowdark, connecting countries and monsters and magic items together. And I promised that my mission would continue, that I would track down every secret that Kelsey has hidden in her various Shadowdark products. But then, someone in my comments brought something to my attention. There's a lot of the same names in the Arcane Library D&D 5e adventures too, lots of connections. Oh yeah, this goes much deeper than any of us expected. So to get to the bottom of this, I bought all of Kelsey Dion's 5th edition adventures, which included 20 adventures on the Arcane Library website, 2 adventures on D&D Beyond, and 1 free adventure you can get for signing up for the Arcane Library newsletter. And we're just going to pour through these adventures looking for every single proper noun that we can find to connect to the lore already established in the default world of Shadowdark. This video is not sponsored by the Arcane Library, by the way. Kelsey doesn't even know that I'm making this video. Also, this video is going to contain some spoilers for these adventures. I'll try to be as vague as I can be, or stick to the simple pitch whenever possible, but if you hear me say something that you think spoils the adventure, then you're agreeing to run the adventure as a GM instead of playing through it as a player. That's how it works. That's the rule. You're a GM now. Temple of the Basilisk Cult. This is a free first-level D&D adventure that you get whenever you sign up for the Arcane Library newsletter. There aren't any proper nouns that connect it to the world that we discussed in the last video, so there's nothing here that explicitly connects the adventure to Shadowdark. That being said, while we're here, I do want to highlight a really cool piece of design in this adventure, and this is actually true for most, if not all, of the Arcane Library adventures we'll discuss today. Each adventure opens with a section that reads, "A word to the GM." They seem to almost be all exactly the same, and they read as follows. This adventure is meant to be run at a glance with minimal preparation and a natural delivery. This required rethinking the normal adventure presentation a bit. Here's what you'll find included. Each encounter contained on one page. Bulleted lists, bolded keywords, hyperlinks to monsters and rules online for quick reference, printable cards for each monster and PC so you can run encounters using a card stack. A short video walkthrough of this method can be found here. Short room and area descriptions, no paragraphs of droning flavor text, set the scene naturally and embellish as desired. Briefly explained non-encounter rooms, again, embellish as desired. GM maps and player-safe digital maps for use with digital tabletops. Printable cards for special treasure handouts. A short video walkthrough of the adventure that can be found here. Now, while this adventure may not contain any explicit references to the same setting as Shadowdark, I do think it's noteworthy that some of these guiding philosophies of adventure design are actually very similar to what we'll see in Shadowdark's dungeons. Things like the lack of flavor text and barely explained rooms left open for the GM to come up with the descriptions and judge how much detail should be included, and keeping the section super short so it all fits on one page. This is just the kind of thing that we would go on to see in Shadowdark. For example, this is a Shadowdark dungeon, and it's just a postcard. Again, that's an extremely minimalist approach. And while obviously Kelsey's 5e adventures aren't designed to fit on a single page, there is still a very clear focus on cutting out the stuff people tend to skip, and cutting out the stuff that she feels GMs don't need, such as flavor text. It all moves us in the direction of rulings, not rules, which is central to the OSR games like Shadowdark. Ghostlight. This is another first-level adventure, and it's about a ghost ship that contains the afterlife for departed sailors within its hull. Now, obviously, if you're anything like me, that just makes you think of Davy Jones and the Flying Dutchman from the 2nd and 3rd Pirates of the Caribbean films. So, I want to be clear. It's not that the souls of dead sailors work aboard the ship, and it's otherwise basically a normal ship. Instead, imagine the ship is like a TARDIS with a whole world inside. Except also, that world includes both a heaven and a hell for sailors. Now, while this idea doesn't actually appear in the Shadowdark core rulebook, it would be perfectly at home in that game, so I think this is an adventure that you could easily transplant into Shadowdark. Probably more easily than most of these, to be completely honest. Also, this adventure includes a rat pirate, which is pretty great. However, I also want to take this opportunity to highlight another cool piece of design. Each page of the adventure is a separate section, which is a good way to make the adventure more readable. Like, there doesn't seem to be any room or encounter that takes more than a page. But each section also includes a dramatic question. For example, if we look at this adventure, we have combat encounters where the dramatic question is, can the characters defeat the Shadow Rats? Exploration encounters where the dramatic question is, will the characters board Ghostlight? And role-playing encounters where the dramatic question is, Will the characters help Darby, or will the characters get any useful information from Mad Tilly? This actually helps a lot because it gives the game master a clear goal for that scene. When the scene begins, the GM knows they should establish the dramatic question as quickly as possible. Once that dramatic question has been answered, the GM can use that as a guideline for when it's time to move on to the next scene. It's a really smart piece of design that I haven't seen anywhere else before, but it really helps focus your D&D games in a way that would have a huge impact on the pacing. Mask of the Worms. Another first-level adventure. This one is inspired by the writings of Edgar Allan Poe. It was actually written in partnership with Castle Mac, a D&D actual play team, for when they did a live stream in the Edgar Allan Poe Museum, and that's pretty cool. I'm not a Poe expert, but the major influences seem to be The Mask of the Red Death and The Conqueror Worm, which I didn't know was a poem by Poe. I only knew it as a Hellboy adventure. There are also references to The Telltale Heart, The Cask of Amontillado, and The Pit and the Pendulum, and likely some others I'm not familiar with. The adventure also includes a very brief reference to the folk story of the Willow Man, which does appear in the first Shadowdark zine as a monster stat block and as a spell for the witch class. However, we don't learn anything about the Willow Man in this adventure. This adventure does have a lot of NPCs, and Kelsey does a nice trick where she gives each NPC a quote in their introduction, something that sums up that character. For example, Count Libram Moldovia's sidebar identifies him as a lawful evil human noble, and then gives us a quote. "You think I am mad? A madman cannot plan." That seems like it could be a really great line to help you get into the headspace of these characters. But also, Libram Moldovia is specifically a deranged individual, and so he's meant to talk to himself and rant conspiratorial and nonsense. And so there's actually an appendix that presents snippets of dialogue, well, I guess they're snippets of monologue, and they're divided into different categories, like when the PCs first encounter him, or when he's lost in thought, or when he's shouting things during combat. It's such a valuable resource for a character like that, who could normally be very difficult to roleplay. Treaty of the Tiger King. First things first, this was published in 2018. How did Kelsey Dion know about Tiger King 2 years before the rest of us? It's an adventure for levels 1 to 3, and it focuses on an attempted political assassination. It includes a few different barbarian tribes, but none of them have any particular link to Shadowdark that I could find, although you could very easily drop them into your Shadowdark game, especially if you need to come up with a barbarian tribe on the fly. So while we're here, here's another cool thing that Kelsey does with her 5e adventures. Each encounter and introduction is a single page, but they each end with a transition. These transitions give you some sense of where to go next with the adventure, which is really helpful. Sometimes it's as simple as, go to whatever section is next in the adventure. Other times, the transition gives players a choice between 2 sections they'll go to next. And a few times, the transition will actually give you some guidance on a scene that can bring the players to the next sequence. For example, one transition in this adventure reads, Mordecai pays the bill and hires a coach to take the group to Rami's luxurious inn, the Golden Marmot. Perceptive characters feel they're being watched. Go to Luck Favors the Polite. And that's a really helpful way to give the GM the information they need to connect one scene to the next. And it's also a really efficient design, covering that scene in basically one sentence. Valley of the Gilded Tower. This second level adventure is designed to serve as a sequel to Mask of the Worms, although it can stand alone as well. It's based on more works of Edgar Allan Poe for another livestream from the Edgar Allan Poe Museum, and this time Kelsey included a list of references: El Dorado, The City in the Sea, Eleonora, and The Facts in the Case of M. Valdemar. Also the movie Annihilation. Again, no direct Shadowdark links here, but while we're here, check out this art! Honestly, the art rules in all these adventures, they're just stunning. This adventure just has a couple of my favorite pieces. Crypts of Azarum. Okay, now we're cooking. This is a 3rd level adventure, and it's got some major Shadowdark connections. First, the Church of St. Taragnus makes an appearance, and St. Taragnus is a god in Shadowdark. The adventure points out that you can swap her out for another deity as needed, but considering that St. Taragnus was a human knight who ascended to godhood and became a lawful god, I think she's a great character, so you might as well use her. But that's not even the only Shadowdark connection. This adventure also includes references to Azarum. To quote the adventure, characters proficient in intelligence history know Azarum was an ancient dark empire that fell centuries ago. Characters with a passive intelligence history check of 15 or higher know Azarum was a bloodthirsty dynasty ruled by vampiric warlords and lich queens. This lines up a bit with one of the wicked NPCs from the Shadowdark rulebook, Oba-Ix of Azarum. Oba-Ix was a barbarian warrior from the tribes of Yal-Tul who entered an obsidian ziggurat and became an vampire. So it's up to you whether Oba-Ix was a founder of Azarum, or an honorary member, or the last scion, or whatever you want to establish to connect Oba Ix to the sinister backstory of Azarum that this adventure establishes. This adventure also includes a magic item called the Whisper Skull, and again, let's read. The Whisper Skull is a relic the Azarumian sorcerers used to raise undead armies. A burning emerald glows in the Cyclopean skull's lone eye socket. Fell secrets leach from its hollows in an echoing whisper. Spooky stuff. Definitely helps give you a sense of what Azarum was like. Like, it sounds like they had a sect of sorcerers, potentially as members of the government, or who were otherwise notable figures? That's up for you to decide, but it sounds like they were the type of people to raise undead armies. That's potentially useful to know. Shadows at Last Watch Keep. This 4th level adventure is centered on Drow and revolves around the location of Last Watch Keep, which the adventure tells us is an abandoned outpost built in the Age of Conquering Kings. That's cool. Who are they? Don't know, but they're cool. The party also meets a ghost who was a soldier of the Conquering Kings, so that NPC could share as much or as little exposition as you want about who the Conquering Kings are or were. Now, every Arcane Library adventure ends with an Aftermath section, which presents a list of plot hooks for potential future adventures. It's a really helpful feature. In this case, one of these plot hooks is called The Conquering Kings. There are more castles and keeps the Conquering Kings built that are lost to memory. The mountains could hold other sites to explore and treasures to uncover that reveal the extent of the conquest and eventual downfall of the legendary kings. I get the feeling that you could do a lot with the characters of the Conquering Kings. The Demon in the Mirror. This 5th level adventure opens with the characters imprisoned by the Iron King, whoever that is, and then sent on a mission into the mirror dimension, and then the king will reward them for doing so. Now, I've spoken before about how most published adventures offer 3 plot hooks, one that usually appeals to altruism, one that appeals to curiosity, and one that appeals to a more mercenary mindset. And sure enough, Kelsey's published adventures usually offer 3 plot hooks, categorized as appeal to reward, appeal to heroism, and appeal to curiosity. Here, there's a monetary reward if the party brings back a specific magic item, or appeal to reward. The appeal to heroism: if they rescue the princess, the king will release them and clear their names and invite them to join his secret service, the Black Moon. And the appeal to discovery: saving the princess means breaking the curse of a demon called the Lord of Mirrors. But we're here to talk about Shadowdark connections, and there is a huge one in this adventure. Maybe the biggest one. Maybe I should save this for later in the video, but I'm actually going through these adventures from lowest level to highest level, and Kelsey Dion wrote a level 20 adventure. It's the one that Matt Colville discussed on his channel, so I definitely want to wrap this video up with the level 20 adventure. But as far as Shadowdark connections go, one item of treasure the players can recover is the Tome Mordanticus. A screaming face is stitched into its purple leather cover. It contains every true name in the multiverse, but readers can only read 1d4 names a year, or else go irrevocably mad. Now, this item is apparently named after Mordanticus the Flayed. If you remember my last Shadowdark video, Mordanticus is the mummy lich who now serves as an advisor to the reigning Archmage of Gehenna. He's the one who's linked to the Arcane Library that exists in the world of Shadowdark, as well as being linked to the Ten-Eyed Oracle, the most fascinating and horrifying monster in the entirety of Shadowdark. It's all connected. Anyway, moving on. The Snowstalkers. This is a 5th level adventure that focuses on figuring out what happened to the Red Drakes, another adventuring party. There's no explicit Shadowdark connection here, but there is a thematic one, because rival adventuring companies are a major part of Shadowdark. The Secrets of Skyhorn Lighthouse. This 5th level adventure is actually only available on the DM's Guild. It's an adventure that focuses on a mysterious sea monster, but also puts the party in conflict with eel folk, which are exactly what they sound like. Now, there's nothing in this adventure that specifically requires the use of Wizards of the Coast's IP, so at first, I was scratching my head about why this was on the DM's Guild, but as it turns out, Skyhorn Lighthouse is the setting for another adventure we'll talk about shortly, and that one does take advantage of the benefits of being on the DM's Guild. So in this case, this adventure is essentially presented as a potential prologue for that adventure if anybody on the DM's Guild is looking for a companion piece to that one. And that's important because sometimes you just need to do a little bit of groundwork to help establish a location for your audience. And that can be really hard to do, whether you're writing a published adventure or just running your game for your own players. Of course, establishing a location is easier than ever if you use today's sponsor, World Anvil. World Anvil is a fantastically helpful resource that allows you to take all of your scattered ideas and coalesce them into beautiful articles that you can share with your players. They offer a bunch of fantastic templates and themes, so you can tailor the design of your page to match the feel of your game. We're also reaching the end of the month, so this is your last chance to participate in Adventure April, where they put out the challenge to their audience to create a one-shot adventure or a short story with the theme of adventure. It's a fun opportunity to explore the cool features World Anvil offers and see how they can help you do your writing. And World Anvil is offering a discount to the viewers of this channel. If you visit worldanvil.com/supergeekmike and use the promo code SUPERGEEK at checkout, you could save 51% off of any annual membership. That's right, 51%, that's more than half off your membership. Once again, that is worldanvil.com/supergeekmike and use the promo code SUPERGEEK. Thank you so much to World Anvil for sponsoring this video. Now, I will say, at this point, there are not a ton more connections between Shadowdark and these published adventures. There are a few, and we'll talk about them, but not that many. However, these adventures do have some really interesting and clever innovations that help these adventures stand apart, so I would love to continue to highlight what makes them so cool. Beneath the Black Rose. This is a 6th level adventure all about some undead in an inn. And even if that doesn't excite you, which it definitely should, then I also want to point out that there are 2 awesome factions in this adventure. There's a cult called the Eternal Scions, and a faction called the Deathbringers, which are a covert group of vampire hunters and undead destroyers. Now you could drop both of these into your Shadowdark game, but I actually wouldn't recommend you put the Deathbringers into your campaign, because, to be frank, if your Shadowdark players are invited to join a group of vampire hunters, then they may try to fight monsters instead of flee from them, and that really isn't how Shadowdark is meant to operate. In fact, I would argue that this faction represents Kelsey Dion understanding the difference between Shadowdark and D&D 5e, and writing something into this adventure that specifically appeals to 5e players in a really cool and clever way, whereas it really would not work for Shadowdark players. Fangs of Watali. This 6th level adventure focuses on a bunch of lizard folk in the jungle. The Viperians also make an appearance. They are essentially Shadowdark's answer to the Yuan-Ti. They're the Arcane Library snake men. And we get introduced to 2 new gods. Watali is the lizard folk god, and Nathrexis is the evil snake goddess. I also really want to thank Kelsey for including a pronunciation guide in this adventure to help cover some of the names that may not be as easy to sound out. More adventures should do that. Night on Devil's Peak. This 6th level adventure is one of my favorites of this entire collection, and in no small part that's because it's directly inspired by Night on Bald Mountain / Ave Maria, aka the final and most intense segment from the original Fantasia. The events of that short film play out in this adventure. A massive fiend appears on a mountain, and a bunch of monsters and spooky scary skeletons charge down into the village, and the heroes have to basically protect the town until dawn. Additionally, at a certain point, the spirit of Saint Sophia appears. She's a paladin of Saint Taragnus, and depending on how the players have behaved thus far, Saint Sophia might bless the party. And honestly, this is a really good use of divine intervention from a higher power. Like, this is literally a Deus Ex Machina, but the way it plays out, at least the way it's written, it actually feels really good in the adventure, because it doesn't solve the entire problem, and the players don't even get the benefit if they have not behaved properly. It's a great adventure, straight up. The Curse of the Wardenwood. This is a spooky werewolf and hag adventure for 7th level players, and there's some really smart design here because Kelsey realizes that if you're doing an adventure with werewolves and hags in it, then you should really have some paranoid villagers to help simulate the vibes of a witch hunt or the game Werewolf, and the mood of the villagers can be swayed depending on what the players say and do. But that cuts both ways. Players can say or do the right thing and get the villagers on their side, or say and do the wrong thing and further alienate the villagers. However, that is a lot for any GM to keep track of, which is why the adventure includes a conflict score. It presents a list of certain things the PCs might say and do, and how many points those actions might raise or lower the conflict score by. This is super useful to any GM, let alone one who's relatively new or just not confident in role-playing the shifting sentiments of an angry mob. Monastery of the Shadow Sorcerers. This is a spooky 8th level adventure featuring a monastery that appears from out of nowhere and these strange individuals within. It also introduces a cabal of demons and sorcerers known as Raz Godai, and if you're looking for an evil faction for your D&D game or your Shadowdark game, you should absolutely steal this faction. The Horror Within. This is a very spooky 8th level eldritch horror / cosmic horror mystery set in a theater. The whole thing centers around a great old one, Shagolg the Writhing Clot. Gross. Extra points for the fact that a bunch of these subheadings are references to the theater. Closed indefinitely, curtains rise, encore, behind the scenes, magnum opus. It's great. A lot of Kelsey Dion's work is inspired by the Lovecraft mythos. More on that in a bit. And this one is definitely in line with that, as it's all about a play that drove the entire audience insane. Presumably because there's a scene where Luke throws a lightsaber over his shoulder, because that seemed to be the final incantation of a Lovecraftian spell that broke the brains of half the audience members who saw it. Although, I guess it didn't make them insane, it just made them insufferable. Look, The Last Jedi is fine, but someday I need to make a video essay about why all these film bros are obsessed with plot holes and yet they don't actually understand character arcs. Anyway, back on topic. The Corruption of Skyhorn Lighthouse. This 8th level adventure is the other Arcane Library adventure on the DM's Guild, and it includes Chols and an Aboleth. But also, since it's on the DM's Guild, it includes some other Wizards of the Coast IP, like Tritons and the Apparatus of Qualish. However, this adventure is also super inventive. There's a point in the journey where you can choose which ship captain to ride with, and you get presented with a few very colorful characters. One of them is a human, one of them is a goblin, and one of them is a sentient dark mantle wearing a headband of intellect. So, like, you know which one your players are going to choose, right? But the adventure goes even deeper, because each ship captain has different mechanics for how choosing them will impact the random rolls you'll encounter on your journey, and that is super cool. Also, the villain of the piece bears the mark of Dagon, who, if you're not familiar, is a sinister sea god from Lovecraft's writing. And speaking of which, Born in Blood. Spoilers for this 9th level adventure, but it focuses on Dargost, son of the sea god Dagon. It takes place in an abandoned town, but also, we're kind of just doing Shadow over Innsmouth, one of the most famous Lovecraft stories. I actually played in a D&D adventure based on this story before, so I would be really excited to run this one for some players to help capture that cosmic horror vibe through the work of an adventure writer who I think is really good at this. Red Sky at Morning. This actually isn't an adventure. It's some rules that you can use for sea travel. They're appropriate for levels 1 to 10, and they include a bunch of random rolls for sea events, weather events, sea monsters, friendly and enemy ships, random sailor names, and islands and waypoints, that sort of thing. It's a super useful resource. Definitely recommend grabbing this if you are running a seaborne adventure. The Underwarrens. This is another supplement for levels 1 to 10, and it features a goblinoid black market, basically an underground bazaar. I'm kind of picturing the troll market from Hellboy 2. It's also ruled over by the Underlord, a troll merchant prince. Again, you could just drop this into your Shadowdark game. You would have to change out some of the items that they're selling to better fit the balance of Shadowdark, but these merchants are a ton of fun. Okay. Finally, I want to talk about the last 2 adventures, which are much higher level games. Most D&D games never get high enough level for you to play these, but I would definitely recommend you put a game together to play one of these just as a one-shot, because they are fascinating. So let's dig into them. Gate of the Lens Wizards. This is a 15th level adventure, and it is very sci-fi influenced. This July, Wizards of the Coast is releasing Quests from the Infinite Staircase, which includes Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, an adventure that also features some other sci-fi adjacent concepts. So if you wanted to follow that one up with this one, or vice versa, I actually think that they would make a great pairing. This one has some truly wild ideas. It's got a time-controlling artifact called the Chronicle, it's got Cyclopean glass-skulled mages called the Lens Wizards, and it's got lunar spiders, which are exactly what they sound like. It rules. But it's also not nearly as epic as our final entry. Fires of Isk. This 20th level adventure takes place on the Plane of Fire, as Talos Mir the Devourer, the ancient red dragon sealed in the heart of a volcano, begins to awaken and threaten all of creation. This is the adventure Matt Colville ran for his team when they did a level 20 one-shot. And while he made some changes to suit his setting and address some time concerns of their session, I am actually really hoping to run this adventure for some folks really soon. I know plenty of people who are just like Matt Colville. They've been playing or running D&D for their entire adult lives, if not even earlier, and yet they've never had a chance to play or run for the 20th level characters. And I love Ancient Red Dragons. It's probably the Critical Role influence. Plus, this adventure has a whole bunch of other fire-themed creatures like Azers, Salamanders, and Fire Giants. Plus, there's a Balor in it too. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to finding the time to give this one a spin. Okay, so as you can tell, these adventures didn't have quite as many Shadowdark connections as I originally expected. Mainly that's because these adventures don't have a ton of setting information beyond what is absolutely essential, which is just good design in the first place, especially for independently published 5e adventures. However, I am super glad that I read these with the intention of looking for clues, because if you hadn't noticed, I think these adventures are spectacularly well designed. It's not just that they have cool ideas in them, although they definitely do, but so many of them also execute these ideas way better than most other adventures I've come across, and help simplify these concepts for game masters who are new to the hobby. If you're looking for some 5th edition games to run, then you should absolutely check some of these out. That being said, we've also been talking about Shadowdark on this channel, and I do want to highlight some of Kelsey Dion's more recent work, and in line with both of those goals, soon we're going to talk about some of the Cursed Scroll zines, which present open worlds for Shadowdark with different fantasy vibes, and with some new classes and spells and things that help match that vibe. So keep an eye out for that video at some point in the very near future. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe and ring the bell to stay up to date with all of my latest videos. If you want to support the channel financially, you can consider signing up for my Patreon or becoming a YouTube member, or make a one-time donation to my Ko-fi. All those are in the description below. Join my Discord server to hang out with a bunch of awesome people, and sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date with all my latest news. Click here for a video about Baldur's Gate 3. That was a ton of fun. Until next time, play fair and have fun.